This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Coming to you, as always, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Galactic Empire. My name is John Mark Tolley, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Will. How are you today, sir?
I am doing well. Bright suns, everyone. I hope you all are having a good day. Has the weather been kind to you out there in the Midwest?
It has been. It's actually, we had a good rain a couple days ago, which we needed. We're in a middle of a moderate drought out here. It's been hot and dry. Not a lot of rain, but we got a good little downpour the other day, which was good. We needed it, and it's cooled off here.
Yeah, we had a beautiful day today. Today was like a spring day. It was like in the 70s. Not too common for the late June time in New Jersey, but it's of course going to creep up day by day, get hotter and hotter, just in time for my Star Wars yard sale. All you Central Jersey peeps, if you guys are in the area, you can email me, darththuba77@gmail.com, and I'll give you information about it. But it's taking place Thursday, Friday, Saturday, weather permitting. We're supposed to have thunderstorms, but definitely Thursday and Friday. So, typical yard sale times, 9 to 3 or so. Yeah. And it's the Star Wars items along with regular yard sale stuff. So hopefully anybody who's in the area, come out. If you know of anybody, here, and you're looking to, score some Star Wars stuff, let them know, have them show up, and I'll see what I can do. My prices are very reasonable, priced to not lug back in the house. That's what I tell people. And I also tell them, if anybody who's a yard sale aficionado, I'm a yard sale seller. I'm not a yard sale goer. I don't go to them. I try to get rid of stuff.
Yeah.
And but the rule of thumb when you do go to yard sales is that if you're not there an hour before they say it opens, you're not getting anything worthwhile, particularly if you're going toy hunting or collectible hunting. Not to say that I want people showing up at my door at like 4 a.m., but, I'll be out there around 7. So that's when people usually come in. When I have put Star Wars stuff out, typically sells by 10 a.m. the first day. So all of it. Anyway, so what are we talking about?
Tickets to New Jersey.
Tickets to New Jersey are probably going to run you about $800.
Okay, never mind then.
I'm sorry to say, I wanted to tell you one story. I had a person a person who watches the Darth Tuba channel on YouTube. He actually emailed me or messaged me and said, "Hey, I saw on your channel that you had a couple of items that I'd love to purchase. Is there any way that you can hold them for me, and I'll drive there to pick them up?" So I'm thinking he's local. So I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll be happy to hold them, Billy. For a certain amount of time, but after a while, I'm going to put them out." He's like, "Well, I'm coming from Connecticut, so it's going to be a little bit of a drive for me." And I was like, "Wait a second. Now, just for those geographically impaired, Connecticut is kind of a state and a half above New Jersey, and it's about 2 to 3 hours from the very edge of Connecticut to where I live." So
wow,
I was like, "Sir, if you tell me what you want, I'll give you a price plus shipping, like I do on eBay, and I'll ship it out for you. I'll be happy to do that because, I don't want you to, gas is hugely expensive.
Oh yeah,
filling up a tank of gas is going to cost you $50. So, shipping it, and what he ended up buying ended up only costing $18 to ship. So I try to help people out that way. I just can't do it too much. So what are we talking about today, sir?
Well, today we are talking something that has been really ever since, I think, after the release of Kenobi, the term canon has been really brought back into the conversation when it comes to Star Wars. I think even more so than many of the other shows. People questioning, did this or that break canon? So I wanted to take a little bit of a time and just discuss canon in the terms of not only Star Wars, but general storytelling in general. I think it's really important to really know what we're talking about to get a official definition. So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines canon as a sanctioned or accepted group or body of related works, i.e. a canon of literature. in layman's term, these is everything within the story that is considered to be officially part of this story. I mean, how would you define? How would you describe canon?
I would define it very similar to like a body. I like a body of work that sticks to the same universe or the same. I don't want to say same characters per se because there are going to be hundreds of characters, thousands of characters. But yeah, I would say that a storyline that is kind of aligned with its own universe. And I think obviously things like the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's a great framework to work with and around and on.
Yeah.
Because I'll give you, I am not an I'm a big MCU fan. I do love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I never really read. I don't think I've put my eyes on a single comic from Marvel, dealing with those characters: Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. So for me, the stories that I understood were the stories going on and connecting as a second. First there was Iron Man. Actually, first there was Incredible Hulk. Then there was Iron Man. Then the second Incredible Hulk, and then we get Captain America, and then Thor, and then things start to interconnect, and certain characters that start to appear in more than one movie, and they were forming this connective tissue that was really wonderful. And it was something for me as a person who didn't read the comics, I was very excited for, and I think a lot of MCU fans, particularly children growing up with it, became very much a big fan of. And I think that whole other side to this when you're dealing with the comic books, because their comic books go back 75 plus years, 80 years, and there have been all sorts of stories told and retold and reset and it's same thing for the DC universe and the same thing in Star Trek. Star Trek has notably dealt with their whole deal with canon. First you had the series, the original series, and then you had the animated series, but then you started getting this series of books, these stories that were all over the place in terms of what was going on. And they would bring all these ancillary characters back, and a lot of, and that they took a different approach. They said, anything that happens in book form is not really canon.
Yeah. Well, even then, we'll bring this up too, where it's with Star Trek, it's a situation where there's even question about within canon of stuff that even the creator himself, famously, he never considered Star Trek V, which that's the one where Kirk fights God.
Yeah.
He never considered that canon.
Really? I don't know if I knew that.
It was a conflict between him and
Harv Bennett. I know he had Gene Roddenberry had a conflict with a lot of people.
Well, at this time he was in conflict with Kirk.
Oh, with William Shatner.
With Shatner. There was an argument between, because Shatner directed that one and he didn't like some of the direction, so he never considered that canon. But now with the latest episode, this is not a Star Trek podcast, by the way.
I know we're using other examples that. But let's refocus back to Star Wars now.
But one thing I was also going to say is that most people don't realize that every show on TV, whether it's a genre show like a sci-fi or horror, whatever, has a canon.
Oh, okay.
They have what is called, you'll hear it sometimes referred to as the show Bible.
Yes.
Every show has a show Bible, and basically what that is it's a book that the showrunner has that has the backstory of all these characters. And even if you never see that backstory on TV, that backstory is still there, because then that informs the way the character will react, the way they are. It doesn't matter. Seinfeld had a show Bible.
Right.
Every show has a show Bible, and that's kind of what canon is. So every show on TV has its canon.
So with Star Wars, you start off in 1977 with A New Hope, not called A New Hope yet, just called Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And shortly after that, and before, several things happened before Empire Strikes Back came into being. One is, we mentioned this in earlier episodes, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was a novel that was written in, I believe, as a possible sequel. And I think the idea was, and don't quote me on this, but I'm believing this is true, that the idea behind the Splinter of the Mind's Eye was that in the event that Star Wars itself, the first movie, was a flop or not a really big success, George Lucas would still want to continue stories. So he asked this, whoever it was, to write a kind of a treatment for Splinter of the Mind's Eye, for the historical Splinter that he called Splinters of the Mind's Eye, and it kind of the further adventures of Luke Skywalker. Kind of like very, Saturday morning serial type stuff. Okay. But then the movie was a huge hit. They released the book as a way to simply, entice people to stay involved because, he knew it was going to take 3 years at minimum to come up with the next movie. So this is something that they did. And the book was in the story, and a lot of people didn't read the book. And so they don't know the story, but apparently Luke met up with Vader in that story. And so did Leia for that matter. So it was a very different story. It goes in a very different direction. At the same time, or around the same time, Marvel, had gotten the rights to create Star Wars comics. And the first 4 or 5 or whatever were just a movie adaptation, a comic adaptation of the movie.
Right.
And then it went into their own adventures. And that's where we get Jackson the Green Rabbit. That's where we get Crimson Jack, the pirate. That's where we get the Hoojibs, which are these little bunny-like creatures that are apparently very intelligent. You get all these different characters that go through, and there's all these adventures that last for 3 years, and then, oh, look, Empire Strikes Back comes out. And then you have a whole other series of adventures beyond that. Now you bring Lando into it. And they just kept going. And there's some great stories. There's some not so great stories. We also got things like the Han Solo trilogy, Han Solo and at Star's End, or Lando Calrissian and the Mind Harp of Sharu, which one of my favorite things in Solo is how they actually did a call out to some of his adventures from those books. And it's at the time. Now the question is it canon? Is it not canon? It wasn't defined.
No.
Right away.
And I think that like early on in the creation of a show like that, it's easier to play, especially at that time, it's easier to play fast and loose with canon because people didn't really pay that much attention to it.
Right.
Like they do now.
You're right. There weren't internet sites totally devoted to every word spoken about Star Wars.
Yeah. And I think I started noticing people really started talking about the canon of Star Wars with the release of the Thrawn novels and those kind of early EU books. That's when I started noticing people questioning, like, are the books canon? Are they not canon? Where do they fit in?
Yeah.
Because at the time, we hadn't had anything.
Well, yeah. I mean, the only thing, up until the Thrawn came out, up until Heir to the Empire, 1991, what did we have? We had 3 movies, the 3 main movies. We had the Star Wars Holiday Special, aired only once, but still.
It's there.
It's there. We had the 3 Han Solo books, the 3 Lando books, the Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and we had the 2 Ewok movies. And beyond that, it was the droids and Ewok cartoon. And we didn't have nothing.
Yeah.
But we had the droids and Ewok cartoon. We had all the comics. There was quite a bit. It was like 112 issues or something like that of comics. There was a comic strip that was separate, like a daily, 3 or 4 panel comic strip. So that was, and we had a couple of books on tape or adventure, Star Wars adventure kind of things. So we had quite a bit of content. Mm-hmm. But in terms of visual content, if you want to restrict it to just visual, meaning commit to screen, 3 movies plus the 2 Ewok movies, the Saturday morning cartoon, and the holiday special.
Yeah.
So, when the Thrawn novel came out, it opened up the floodgates. Courtship of Princess Leia, Rogue Squadron. I mean, the Knights of the Old Republic, Shadows of the Empire. Shadows of the Empire, man, that was huge.
That was huge.
Lucas, for those who weren't around for this, the Lucasfilm put together this amazing, basically, campaign for this story called Shadows of the Empire, which was a story that takes place between Empire and Jedi. Obviously, Han Solo was not present because he was frozen in carbonite, either on his way to Jabba's or at Jabba's. And it was just this whole adventure that Luke and Leia and Lando and Chewie and the droids went on to try to rescue Han. A new character named Dash Rendar kind of took Han Solo's place as the rogue, kind of came in. And that was Prince Shizor, the Faline, right? That was the villain. And it was pretty intense. There was but here's what they did. They basically created a movie tie-in with no movie. They had an album. They had toys. They had a comic book. They had a video game. They had a soundtrack. Was it Joey McNeely? I have to look it up. McNeely was his last name. He composed with an orchestra, not even like keyboards, a whole orchestra. He composed an entire soundtrack, and it's good. It was like this entire thing that did kind of everything for a movie other than the movie.
Yeah.
So that was definitely considered canon by all accounts. But I will tell you that George Lucas kind of made a statement, I want to say probably at least 20 years ago, or about 20 years ago. So it was a few years before he sold off Lucasfilm. And he said that he considered several types of canon. There was his canon, which was anything that was in the movies. At the time, I don't think Clone Wars was out yet, so I think he just said anything that came out in the movies was considered canon. And then there was the ancillary canon. I don't know what he called it, but it was like another kind of like a B-level canon, which is all the comics, video games, books, novels. And then the third was fan canon, or the FU, the fan universe, where it's just, fanzines and people's, ideas and fan theories and people that write stuff, fan films, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there might have been another category broken down, but that was basically the way he kind of, and remember, this is the George Lucas that's still running Star Wars, still, making prequel films, but allowing other people to play in a sandbox via novels and comics and video games.
Yeah.
That's kind of where he defined it.
Well, let's kind of talk about that sandbox. And one thing I think that if you're a writer, from a writer's standpoint, that I think can be both a blessing and a curse when it comes to canon is you have that sandbox to work in. You have that group of characters, so you have a pre-made sandbox already there for you. You have all the characters, the whole setting already there, and you just have to go and you just have to play with them. That's basically your job. It's like maybe add a few here and there. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the template's already set for you. If you're a writer, it's like the template's already set for you. It's like, here's the outline, you just fill in the details. But I think and this is where the issue can come if you try to stick so close to canon, like really, really close to canon, is that can be restrictive. Well, where you don't have, you may not feel like you have the freedom because, like, oh, how far do I stray away from this? How far do I go from here? That's not going to be, like so far off canon that people are going to be like, wait a minute, that's not happening in Star Wars. Well, I think it can be restrictive too, I think.
Yeah, but I also think that barometer has moved a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You have to remember that Star Wars in 1999, you had a lot of books and novels. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of tie-ins for the prequels, like like leading up to the prequels and then in between the prequels. There'd be Obi-Wan adventures with Qui-Gon. There'd be Darth Maul adventures, kind of setting up his backstory. So you had a lot of this stuff, and when it's just movies, it's a little bit easier. Well, it was a little bit easier.
Well,
okay. But what I'm saying is, when it was George Lucas and it was his world, he could set these things apart. So I know that when I've read a lot of interviews with authors, and I think a lot of times what happens is that they might pitch an idea to Lucasfilm, and they'll pitch a story, but Lucasfilm will come back and say, like it or not, or they'll say, like it, but lose the stuff about the Jedi, lose the stuff about Luke with a romance, lose the stuff about like Leia and Han Solo getting married or whatever. Like there are certain things that were off limits, which is restrictive. It is a limited sandbox.
I do think though that maybe like the early 90s, the authors, I think, might have even had a little bit more leeway because since you didn't have new movies coming out, they had a little bit more of an open sandbox. As
Right.
long as you didn't counterdict anything that happened in the original trilogy, I think you're okay to move forward and kind of create your own story.
Well, how
But
about
then,
the whole future of Han and Leia getting married, having 3 kids?
yeah,
Luke getting married, having a kid. There's a whole
yeah, and
story
you were a
that
little bit. Whereas now, especially now that stuff that's happened in the novels is being mentioned in the movies, it's being mentioned in the TV shows and the cartoons, which are considered canon. I think now authors are. I think maybe Disney and Lucasfilm is a little bit more restrictive as to what they're allowing.
Well,
Like,
okay. Before we go on, we should kind of mention to anybody who doesn't know. I mean, obviously, most people watching the show know that we even had an episode about it 10 years ago. Lucasfilm was purchased by Disney.
right?
George Lucas, the man, is no longer affiliated with anything. Okay, involved with everything. Just kind of comes and sees them and puts his stamp of approval or whatever, or complains about it. Now we have a few either months or a year or so after the purchase happened, Lucasfilm made a very important, and Disney made a very important announcement, and that was they basically blew up the expanded universe. That's a mean way to say it. The reality of what they said was all of the stories that were in comic form, video game form, novel form, okay, all of those stories are going to be considered legendary, legend status, meaning that we are not tied to the canon that those stories created, which will allow us to start a new canon and kind of moving forward, kind of align everything. Now, this is nothing new. It was great that they did it. I mean, it really was, because I got to tell you, I'm not a huge novel reader, but I did read some, and there were a few stories that, towards the end there that were just getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was getting too mundane and too real world, in my opinion. So it was good that they made this. I mean, and it was too committing. You had to commit too much. I mean, the whole New Jedi Order. Did you read those? Did you read those 27 books or whatever?
I started to. I really stopped shortly after the Using Vong novels.
That's what I mean. That's the New Jedi Order.
Oh yeah. I think I read most of those, but then
you read 25 books. It was really seriously 25.
I read quite a bit of them. I don't know if I read all 25, but I read quite a bit of them. But then when you start getting
more
into
patient than I am, my friend.
When you start getting into Leia's son turning into the Sith Lord, and that I was just kind of like,
I got done. I threw my hands up when, spoiler alert, when they killed Chewie. I was like, you know what? I get it. You got to tell stories, and you want to have the gravitas. And, when they killed Superman back in, the 90s or whatever, 96, 97, record sales, but then of course they brought him back. And, and I think that was just ridiculous. So to kill Chewie, the one character that could live on for like forever, that's the character you're going to kill. You're not going to kill the characters that only have a lifespan of 100 years, maybe, just like us, that, go after the one that's, that you could have stories with new characters. So anyway, so Disney made that announcement, and they only called the movies, the Clone Wars, Rebels at the time, and anything moving forward in the novels, comics, everything. That was a bold move on their part.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, they had a hard reset, right? That they could, they could limit everything that they've seen. They don't have to be married to it. They can pick and choose, because they didn't say it didn't happen. They said it's legendary status. Now, with legends, if you think about when somebody tells a legend, a story as a legend, they're going to exaggerate, tell it one way, maybe exaggerate one part, leave out another part. So you can take things like Grand Admiral Thrawn, for example, and some of his qualities, some of his, the way he is as a tactician and as a villain, a different type of villain than Vader. And you can plop that into Rebels and now hopefully I'm assuming into Ahsoka, and move forward with that. Okay, so there is an advantage to that, and it was a smart move, I believe, for Lucasfilm and Disney to make that choice. But now, that was a while ago. That was about 10 years ago. Now they have 5 more movies, 4 Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett. They're all 3 streaming services series. A ton of novels, a ton of comics, a ton of more video games. Okay, so now you have painted yourself in the corner.
Yeah,
and
exactly,
with each passing year, there's hours of more media to digest. And I'm a super fan, guys. I am, but I don't digest comics. I just don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't dislike comics per se. I just don't digest them. I don't have time. I don't have the
And
interest.
I think this is where you have to be careful, especially with fans that maybe only watch the movies and the TV shows, that you don't create a thing where, okay, unless you read all these novels and you see all these read all these comics, you're not going to understand at all what's going on in the TV show. You have to be careful that you keep everything. Like, you could still keep it that these other canon just add to the story, but that if you're coming into it from a fan that only watches the show or watches the movie, that you're still going to enjoy it and still going to know what's going on and not be completely lost.
Okay, I'm going to push back just a tiny bit on that, because that is true. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But as I told you, the barometer keeps moving. You see, like, it's one thing to and Obi-Wan and Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, they did all of this. They had little call-outs and little throwbacks and even character introductions, okay, that harken back to a comic or a novel or a video game, right?
Right.
I don't read the novel. I read the occasional novel. I read the occasional comic book, but I don't read them all. And therefore, I might not catch those. Now, it doesn't impede on the story. It's okay.
Right.
That's not a big deal. It's just a little added extra, an Easter egg for people who know.
Right. And that's what I was talking. Yeah.
Right, exactly. However, now here's what's going on. See, now, and this is, I think, a direct result of Dave Filoni throwing his hat in the ring, his literal hat, in the ring. And don't anybody misinterpret. I love that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are playing in the Star Wars sandbox now. Okay. Yeah. But with Dave Filoni's entrance, now we've elevated Ahsoka. Now Ahsoka's getting their own series. You got to remember, there are a lot of people who did not watch Clone Wars. If you did not watch Clone Wars at all, then some of Obi-Wan, Book of Boba Fett, some of Obi-Wan, some of Mandalorian might not make as much sense or resonate as much, because you are dealing with things that, you're getting into one person's absolute must watch is another person's, well, I only saw the movies. So the further we go down the road here, the more we start creating characters and situations not created by George Lucas, but in fact created by Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and Deborah Chow, and fill in the blank of the directors and writers and creators. We're getting a bit, and J.J. Abrams, we're getting a bigger universe.
Yeah.
And now it's not just about comics and just about novels and video games. It's about, watching, seeing all, new visual characters from other mediums, TV shows that not everybody's going to catch. Look at what happened with Rogue One. Rogue One was a huge hit overall. Yeah. But there were a lot of people that walked into that theater and was like, "What happened to Rey? Where's Finn? Yeah, where's Poe? Why do the stormtroopers look like they did? They didn't even understand that this was taking place before.
Yeah,
40 years before Force Awakens. There is an education aspect that moviegoers are now expecting to understand. And while, yes, they still want to create a movie that the average Joe who's never seen any of this can go in and be entertained, I think that goal is getting harder and harder to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I know that there was a few people I saw that also, you're talking about Rogue One, they were wondering, where the Bothans were.
Yeah.
I was like, wrong movie.
Wrong movie.
Wrong movie. Although I am still waiting for Rogue 2, Mini Bothans. This is kind of off topic, but I saw
I know the comic you talk about, Tag and Bink.
No, this is a different one.
But it was somebody about a guy named Manny Bothans.
No.
That was Tag and Bink, but yeah.
No, this was a different one. This was it was a scene with Mon Mothma gives the Mini Bothans line, and Akbar is sitting right next to her, and he says, "That's the last time we use Bothans for anything." Like he said, like I had a bunch of them asked to go get me some coffee, all dead.
I don't know where that. I've heard of that, but I don't know where that came from. Never send a Bothan out for anything. They'll die trying.
They'll die trying. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, I do think that we're getting into. I mean, and again, I don't mean to bounce back to the MCU, but it's just that the MCU's kind of got, they've cornered the market on this at present. Although I do think Star Wars is going to eventually catch up. I think, but MCU has cornered the market on, just a complete volume of film, 20-something films, culminating to Endgame, Infinity Wars and Endgame. And it's quite amazing that they were able to achieve what they did. And I'm very pleased with it, and I'm very excited for that. However, I do think that now, because they didn't stop, now they're going into phase 4 and they're trying to do more things and bring more people in. Now they're getting into a problem. They're getting into a big problem. And that's, not everybody saw Shang-Chi. And part of it is the pandemic, true, but it's on Disney Plus. But not everybody saw Shang-Chi. Not everybody saw The Eternals. I just watched Multiverse of Madness last week, and it was good. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it was out there, man. They want to take this into another direction. And now they're trying to fight. They're not fighting anything. They're trying to utilize this catalog, thousands of characters, villains, and different types of characters. But the average moviegoer doesn't know all of these. So you have to figure out a way to provide the exposition and teach them and have it still be interesting. But, somebody put a meme out there. It's like 2086 or something. The year is 2086. You have to see 500 Marvel films and read and 28 TV shows all seasons to understand the plot of the movie you're about to watch.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thing. That is the danger of being too invested in canon.
Yeah.
Now a solution to this is to continue to create new characters. And that's where Star Wars has an advantage over Marvel. Because Star Wars is not as old and it doesn't have as many characters in their library. So they create them. They created the Mandalorian. They created Fennec Shand. They created Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Not to mention a lot of other ancillary characters that have come through from Clone Wars all the way up. Oh, look at the entire cast of Rebels. That's a whole other. And now a lot of them are getting the live action treatment. So they have the ability to start with something fresh. And as long as they can be creative and put a lot of characters in Solo, and although Solo, I don't know, still gets a bum rap. I loved Solo. I hope that there's enough make Solo 2 happen to at least warrant a limited TV series, because they've proven what they can do with Obi-Wan. And another thing that came out this week about Obi-Wan, I don't know if you saw this, but their budget was very minimal on Obi-Wan. Really? Like what they were able to accomplish with the amount of money, with the cost was much less than people imagined it would be.
Oh.
So they're really scaling down the cost to do this. That void, that the different places that these interiors that they can do these digital backdrops are really scaling down the cost. So yeah, they can get down to doing just a really more intimate story, even just a handful of episodes if they want, or just make a movie, but do like they did with Obi-Wan, put it in a few episodes and tell a story. Tell a story about, bring Alden back and have another, solo adventure. I have a feeling they'll do something with him if this Lando series gets off the ground and Donald Glover is attached, that'll be a way to do that. So anyway, so I do think that Star Wars, the brand Star Wars, has an advantage because they can always create new characters. They don't have to be tethered to the old character.
Yeah.
And if they do want to introduce an old character, they're not as tried and true. Their history is not so vast that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the area where the people that have the most issue with Canon are fans. I think
really fans have a problem with something.
I know, right?
I mean, geez.
You saw it in the sequels with that's not how Luke would act. That's not how Luke would act. That's not
I still don't get that. But whatever. Okay.
And you saw it in. I really started. You saw it, of course. Like I said, I don't think you saw it as much with Mandalorian. No, because again, this was a new character.
Yes, it was a new character. Although there was some kickback in that people wanted you got a lot of Boba Fett fans who wanted a Boba Fett character, and they got this, and they're like, well, that's essentially Boba Fett.
And I'll be honest. When I first heard that they were doing a show about the Mandalorian, what I had my thoughts and what I was hoping for, and I did not get what I was hoping for. Right. But I still like the show. What I was hoping for is they're going to do the Mandalorian Wars. That they're going to do Old Republic. They're going to do, the Mandalorian Wars with the Jedi, that whole storyline. When I found out, I admit when I first heard they were going to do like this, the kind of the story they were going for is just kind of like, eh. But then I was brought on board because I came in with an open mind. I'm like,
right.
It's maybe not what I was hoping for. But let's see what they got. I saw what they had. I'm like, I'm on board.
For me, that whole thing, and again, we've talked about this, but I've always felt that, managing expectations is, it used to be a suggestion and now it's got to be a mantra in your life, everybody's life, because it's so easy to be set up for disappointment. Case in point. Next week, I take my pilgrimage to Batuu, Galaxy's Edge. Real life talk. I'm going to Disney World. Okay. Now, anybody who is a Disney fan will tell you that it is a far more complicated thing to do. Go to Disney World now. It's much more expensive. It's much more planning that is needed. It is much more complex than it used to be. Now, I have been going many, many, many years. And I will tell you, without fail, I have a wonderful time. But it's because I manage my expectations. I'm not sitting there expecting to get up in the morning and walk into an empty park and walk onto every ride I want to go on, pay 50 cents for every food item I want, and $1 for every souvenir that I want, and go and come home fully relaxed. That is not how these things work. I do things on my end. I plan, I prepare, I take small breaks in the middle of the day to relax so that I am rested. I do those kind of things. Now I also go for a long time because A, we have the summer off, and B, my daughter lives down there. So it's the only time we get to see her. So we spend an extended time.
Yeah.
And as a result, I never rush. I'm never there for more than a few hours, but I enjoy the resorts. I enjoy hanging out by the pool, and just, it's a much more relaxed and fun experience. Plus, my wife and I are adults. We have no little kids. Not that I love taking our daughter when she was little. I miss that in some ways, but she meets up with us and we go as 3 adults and hang out and do stuff, and we have a good time. So the point is that you got to manage your expectations with everything. And that includes when a new show comes out. Mm-hmm. Even if it's a show that has a character that you love. I mean, there are so many Boba Fett fans who were so disappointed. And I don't know if they were disappointed because of the story they wanted Boba Fett to be, or if all of the ancillary material that they've read or seen up until this point that painted a different picture of Boba Fett. But some of that was thrown out the window when George Lucas told the story of Episode 2, right? With young Boba, making him a clone. So there's just a lot that goes into it. But you're right. Fans are the ones who have the biggest issue. And if you're going to do anything with a returning character, let alone a returning character played by the same actor that played those characters.
And we kind of talked about even before Obi-Wan came out, when the trailers had come out and we were getting ready to watch the first episode, about the fact that you have this character that everyone knows and everyone loves, and what would the fan reaction be to this character and him coming back, as far as keeping close to canon and stuff like that. We already kind of talked about that. And we talked about also the fact that, I think we both agree that they were able to close any quote unquote plot holes that they might have had rather quickly and rather distinctly by the end of it. So that anything that might have been an issue in the first few episodes, by the time of the last episode 6, everything had been closed. Everything made sense. It added to the original trilogy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that one of the things that I thought about this the other day, when you're dealing with the prequels or the original trilogy or even the sequel trilogy, when you're dealing with big blockbuster films that come out and are telling a story over a 2 to 3 year span, you have to pay. Look, unless you're Peter Jackson and you want to have your 3.5 hour movie and then get a director's cut that's 4.5 hours, you basically have to paint a movie with a hugely broad stroke brush.
Right.
And now, thanks to Disney Plus and the streaming services, you can go back and other storytellers can come in and tell these little side stories that kind of take the little fine brush and put in all the detail of certain areas. So that when you look, because again, well, maybe now it's different, but I don't believe when movies, traditionally speaking, I don't think people expected movie producers expected people to watch movies more than once.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that there was people were sitting around, back in the 40s and 50s of 1940s, 1950s saying, all right, how are we going to do repeat viewing? All right. They just didn't do that. Okay.
Yeah.
It became more evident later on that people were doing that maybe there was a little bit more.
Well, even back then, I remember my dad talking about, because my dad grew up in the 40s and the 30s and 40s, that you'd pay you didn't really have those kind of numbers, because you'd pay one price and you walk in the theater and you could be there all day.
Yeah.
You just stay there and the movies run a loop.
15 cents. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's why Gone with the Wind is still considered the most successful movie purely of all time, purely by ticket sales.
Yeah.
Because they were able to try, not how much money it made, because come on, inflation and 3D films and whatever changes that. But if you just number of tickets sold to see a movie, just the number of tickets, it's still Gone with the Wind #1, and it's Star Wars #2. It's amazing to think about that. Even Avengers Endgame did not top those numbers, and they topped every other record, but they still haven't topped that number. Yeah. So, and I think there's a reason for that. I think, there are certain times in movie history where people have everyone went to see it. Everyone went to see it. Versus other things like, not everybody went to see it. As amazing as Endgame was, as amazing as, Force Awakens was, not everybody went to see it. There's lots of people who had no interest in seeing it. So, yeah, but I think that, you're right, that the fans do get very nitpicky. Nowadays, everything is so much. It's not, you don't even have to leave your house. Everything is rewatchable. And all these websites who break it down. It's become part of for me, and I'm sure you're in the same boat, it becomes part of the watching experience. We watch an episode of Obi-Wan, and usually because of the fact that I'm watching it not a day later, but, by the end of the day, it drops at 2 a.m. or whatever. I'm not watching it until 4 p.m. So by then, a lot of people have been watching. And what do I do immediately after that? I go to New Rockstars and find, or Screen Crush.
Yeah.
And check out their Easter eggs, their talk.
Shout out to Screen Crush and New Rockstars.
Yes.
Great. They're probably the two best as far as finding Easter eggs and breakdowns.
Looper does a good job of it sometimes too. But New Rocks, they're just so on top of it. And they do multiple episodes breaking down a lot of different things. So not that I always agree with what they're saying, and I don't always I don't always. And they're not. They rarely get critical. They think that's another thing they say mostly positive. And if when they do get critical, they back things up with reasonings behind it and stuff. And I feel very comfortable watching or not watching and skipping it over to the next one if I just am not liking what they're talking about. But anyway, yeah, it's become part of the viewing experience. So it's a very different world. Watching these stories is very different. And yet now, yeah, we are looking at a potential issue because you're going to run into the same problem that, they ran into before Lucasfilm decided to blow up the universe. I mean, they have a story group. They have a Lucasfilm story group and they have Leland Chee, the keeper of the holocron. These are the guys that keep track of every story. But in an effort to try to kind of combat that and not get, stuck in the weeds, if you will, they try to move stories away. Like, perfect example, the High Republic. Okay? 200 years ago, the only crossover character is Yoda. Makes sense, right? 200 years ago, all new characters, all new adventures, new parts of the galaxy, okay? And they don't have the level of issue that, other people do. But not everybody wants to read that high. I read the first book, and I read one of the comics, set of comics. I liked it, but, the only problem with that is that now you're looking at Star Wars, and there's literally 47 new characters, and they all have weird names, and they're no Bobs or Chris's or Johns.
Yeah.
They're all like, Avrin, Chris, and, all these different names, and you have to try to keep track of them. And they do a good job, but, of setting the exposition, explaining it. And it is a good way to separate the story.
Yeah.
And they've done it before. Knights of the Old Republic was another example of that.
Yeah.
Not that I ever read that one. But I do think that that's about the only way that you can do this is just to try to occasionally create something new, set it away from the story. I mean, it's great that we have all these cool stories taking place between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. But you're not going to be able to go to that well forever.
Right. Yeah. Because the sandbox is going to get crowded.
Right.
And you're going to get like I think one thing, that, I haven't had a chance to read any of the High Republic books, but one thing I think that me personally, that I think they should kind of shy away from with those books is don't bring in a Skywalker.
I don't think they did yet.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm hoping that they don't, because I think then you're really getting into a can of worms. Like, all right, we get it. There's another Skywalker.
Yeah, I think that they want to close the book. Lucasfilm wants to close the book on the Skywalker saga. So I would imagine that they're really going to try to stay away from that. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that they need to stay away from. I get Yoda. That's fine, and Yoda doesn't play a prominent role. He's there. He comes and goes. We got to remind you though. There's like young adult novels. There's some children's books, all taking place in this world. So he might be more prominent there. But as far as the main story, I read the first book. I haven't read the second one yet. But I think that that's one area in Star Wars. When you're talking about Star Wars canon, I think that's one advantage that Lucasfilm has, is that they're relatively young in their story and their characters, and they don't. And I do like that they can cherry pick some of the real successful characters. They got Thrawn. I'm trying to think of the name. Oh, they got Rook, I think his name is,
Rook,
the Nogri.
Rook. Yeah,
they took him into Rebels. I think Captain Pelion was mentioned.
Pelion was mentioned, yeah.
So they've done a few characters. I like, frankly, that they blew up the children of Han and Leia and just had Ben Solo. I like that storyline better. I liked Kylo Ren, one of the stronger points of the sequel trilogy. And I don't mind, and I think that it was, the other thing they got to remember that storytellers are going to take risks.
Yeah.
They're going to take risks, and you have to let them take risks. If it doesn't pan out for you, fine. But I think Rey was a very good challenge. So, and I think Finn, and I think there's more of Finn's story to tell.
Yeah.
So I hope that they don't shy away fully from the sequel trilogy characters. I hope they revisit them eventually.
one thing I want to put. I've said this before on Twitter posts when it comes to fans, not just fan expectations, but headcanon. Headcanon is fine. Whatever you want to think of, if you don't like the way something's going, you're like, well, I think as long as you remember, you do not have the right as a fan to determine what is canon and what is not. Just because I hear this a lot of times, that's not real Star Wars. That's not real Star Wars. Or other thing, that's not real Star Trek. That's not whatever.
Right.
You do not have the right to determine what is. Just because you do not like something does not mean that that does not exist.
And
You can't.
let me jump on top of that too. And just because you have a podcast, YouTube channel, several YouTube channels, and just because you have fancy lettering, graphic design, whatever, that makes your whole setup look very professional, it is still, and you can have the ear of Lucasfilm, and you can have the speed. You can have all, writers and directors and creators on speed dial on your phone for interviews. None of that changes the fact that you are just spouting opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make it sound like you don't matter. Of course, no, everybody matters to some degree. Okay, you're a human being. You matter. You have worth and dignity. You matter. But your opinion about whether this particular Star Wars episode or show or movie or comic or video game is good or bad or indifferent is just that.
Yeah, it's an opinion.
Your opinion.
And I've said this before too. People nowadays conflate opinion with facts.
Yes.
And they think that their opinion is fact. Like you'll hear things like, this movie is categorically bad. Well, no, that's just your opinion that it is bad. Just like it is my opinion that a movie might be good.
Right.
That doesn't mean that that's right or wrong. It's just an opinion. And to say that because something does not fall into what you think it should be, that it is not canon, well, let me tell you, you do not own the intellectual property of Star Wars or Lucasfilm. No. So therefore, you do not have the authority to say that.
And you're more than welcome to write your own fan fiction.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that does not mean that it's canon.
And make a fan film. I mean, there are people that have created. Heck, Lucas gave out awards for people's fan film. Okay, so it's not like
it's not canon.
It might be very well made. It might be a great story, and I love that there's even room for that. There's even room to have that kind of. People do radio dramas. They write their own comics. I mean, there's even their own fan art. There's some amazing things that you can see out there and understand, and resonate with you. But you just got to understand that it's, canon. I believe canon is necessary. I believe the one thing we didn't talk about. I think the canon is extremely necessary unless you are only telling one story with a movie or a book or a story with a beginning and a middle and an end done, and you're never going to touch it again, you are going to have canon. Okay? And you need to use it. All right? Now, how important is it? Well, it depends on the medium. Okay? I think in Star Wars, it is very important. And I think the success that Disney and Lucasfilm have been seeing with all of the Disney Plus series, okay, and the success that Disney and Marvel has been seeing with all of the Disney Plus series is related to some good examples, for the most part, of how to use canon to your advantage. And I do think that they've been very successful with that. Yeah. Okay. Funny side note before we start to wrap up. I did think of something else in the 70s that was its own universe. And I just think it's kind of funny when you think about it. Happy Days. You ever see the show Happy Days?
Oh, yeah.
That show, I think, has almost got the record for the most spin-offs.
Oh, yeah. Joni Loves Chachi.
Joni Loves Chachi. Laverne and Shirley.
Mork
and Mindy. All right. Another one that has a lot. What's it called? The one Archie Bunker. All in the Family.
Yeah. All in the Family.
All in the Family. That had the Jefferson. That had a lot of, and both of those shows had a lot of spin-off, like one like backdoor pilots that didn't go anywhere. Yeah. So it's just funny that now is that canon or is that just universe? I don't know, but because they don't, like you said, it might just be a story, like a Bible that they follow, but it didn't really go anywhere. So I just thought that was funny. But yes, I think Star Wars does a good job with canon. I think Star Trek is faltering a little bit. I think that they're trying too many universes at once. Marvel has been doing an amazing job with canon, or at least with MCU canon, but I am hesitant. I wouldn't gamble too much on them trying to pull another Endgame out of their hat, because I hope I'm wrong, because it was fun and I'd love to see it happen again. But I just think that they're tied down, but their canon ties them down so much, that it makes it challenging. And now they're the one good thing I like is they did the Disney Plus thing. Mm-hmm. What they weren't doing years ago, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I thought this was going to be like a TV show tied into the movies. I was all excited. And they sort of did it, and then they kind of went away with it. They just forgot about it. And then they had all those other Netflix shows I didn't even watch that didn't really have anything to do with it. And now they're trying to bring them back, and it's interesting. So, anyway.
All right. Well, Will, why don't you tell the fine people out there where they can find you at on the interwebs?
On the interwebs, I am located on Darth Tuba's Star Wars Unboxing Show on YouTube. And it's a show that we just do lots of unboxings with different toys and collectibles. And as I mentioned, we are having a big yard sale coming up this weekend. Check me out. You can look at an episode a few weeks ago where I kind of go through the Star Wars stuff that I'm putting out there. There'll be more probably. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Darth Tuba Star Wars Unboxing page on Facebook. And if you have any questions, either about War of the Stars or about the Darth Tuba channel or about the upcoming sale, you can email me at darthtuba77@gmail.com. All
right. As for us right here, if you want to get a hold of us, you can get a hold of us at warofthestars1@gmail.com. We are also on Twitter at War of the Stars 1. You can go to our Facebook page, just search War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Join us there and join us in the War of the Stars chat there too. Give a quick shout out to Tanner from Dorkside Nexus. If you listened to our podcast last week, you'll notice we have a Red 5 bumper on us on our beginning of the shows now. If you listen to the audio podcast, he was able to go through, edit our podcast, make us sound somewhat professional, and add that little bumper. And of course, as I mentioned, we are part of the Red 5 Network. Check out red5network.com for all information. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/War of the Stars, or go to spreadshirt.com/shop and just search War of the Stars. You should be able to find us there. Check me out tomorrow. I'm going to be recording a podcast for Nerdament. They're doing a series of tournaments. I was able to listen to a few of their shows. It's kind of a really cool, fun little idea where they pit Star Wars characters against each other in an ultimate epic battle, looking at their skills, their lightsaber. It's just really cool. And next week tomorrow, I will be representing Luke Skywalker. I'm not sure who I'm going to be going up against in my epic battle. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be
but you're going to win because it's Luke Skywalker.
It's Luke Skywalker, so exactly.
Anyway. I'll save you time, just so you know.
It's Luke Skywalker. That's how I should go.
Let me preface, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's how I should go. That's how I should handle it. It's Luke freaking Skywalker.
Done.
Mic drop.
Yeah. I will just force project from inside my house and not even bat an eyelash and whip your butt. So,
That's right. That's right. But anyway, that should be fun. So we will get you the information when that show drops, where you can check that out. And I'll of course be repping War of the Stars. I will make sure I wear my War of the Stars merch. Yeah, that about does it for this week. So as always, remember, this isn't just my Star Wars. This isn't just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next week, may the force be with you.
Till the spire, everyone.